Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on February 19, 1942, authorizing the relocation and internment of about 110,000 Japanese Americans, many of them U.S. citizens. All of their constitutional rights were revoked and were taken to war relocation camps. On June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in history occurred under U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, called Doomsday or D-Day, on the beaches of Normandy, France. At 8:15 a.m. local time on August 6, 1945, the U.S. aircraft Enola Gay released the atomic bomb Little Boy directly over Shima Surgical Clinic in the city of Hiroshima, Japan. At just after 11 o'clock in the morning of August 9, 1945, another atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, Japan. These are the only two occurrences of nuclear weapons actually used. The death toll of both attacks numbered between 150 and 250,000 people. In June or July of 1947, an object crashed in the vicinity of Roswell, New Mexico, which was widely believed to be an alien craft. The incident was the subject of intense controversy into the late 1970s. In a speech given on March 12, 1947, President Harry S. Truman stated that the USA would support Greece and Turkey with economic and military aid to prevent their falling into the Soviet sphere. Historians often cite this as the start of the Cold War. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball in 1947 when he debuted with the Brooklyn Dodgers. He was also selected as Rookie of the Year and was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1962. His jersey number, 42, was retired by all Major League Baseball teams in 1997. The United States of America was a charter member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, which was signed into existence on April 4, 1949. The alliance includes 28 member nations in North America and Europe. As a part of the larger Cold War already underway, the Korean War was fought between the Republic of Korea, supported by the United States of America, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, supported by both China and the USSR, or Soviet Union. The war was conducted between June 25, 1950 and July 27, 1953. The United States Supreme Court ruled unanimously on May 17, 1954, in the landmark case known as Brown v. Board of Education, that declared state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students unconstitutional. This ruling paved the way for integration and the entire civil rights movement. In the early morning hours of Sunday, August 28, 1955, Emmett Louis Till, a 14-year-old African-American boy from Chicago, Illinois, was murdered for the high crime of flirting with a white woman in the town of Money, Mississippi. His death was a major catalyst in the forming of the civil rights movement. While riding a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks disobeyed a bus driver by refusing to make way for whites. She was arrested on December 1, 1955, which sparked the Montgomery Bus Boycott, which lasted from her arrest until over a year later on December 20, 1956. On July 18, 1955, Disneyland opened in Anaheim, California. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 was signed into law on June 29, with an original authorization of $25 billion for the construction of 41,000 miles of highway throughout the USA. The United States national motto, which had unofficially been E Pluribus Unum, is established in 1956 as In God We Trust. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was formed on July 29, 1958. Hawaii became the 50th state on August 21, 1959. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the only general to be elected president in the 20th century, warned in his farewell address of the military-industrial complex. The Bay of Pigs invasion was an unsuccessful action by CIA-trained Cuban exiles to invade southern Cuba in April of 1961. The Vietnam War, within the larger Cold War, began with the landing of 900 military advisors in Saigon in 1961. While the war took place mostly in Vietnam, there was also military action in Laos and Cambodia as well. The belligerents were mostly the Republic of Vietnam, along with the USA on one side, and the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, supported by North Korea, China, and the Soviet Union on the other. The war ended on April 30th, 1975, with the fall of Saigon. The days of October 14th through 28th, 1962, are known as the Cuban Missile Crisis during the Cold War. The Cuban and Soviet governments were building missile silos in Cuba for easy range of medium-range nuclear missiles to reach the continental U.S. This event is generally regarded as the moment in which the Cold War came closest to turning into a nuclear conflict. Engel versus Vitale was a landmark United States Supreme Court case decided on June 25, 1962, that determined that it is unconstitutional for state officials to compose an official school prayer and encourage its recitation in public schools. I Have a Dream was a 17-minute speech given by Martin Luther King Jr., which was delivered on August 28, 1963, and in which he called for racial equality and an end to discrimination. The speech was given from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was a defining moment of the American Civil Rights Movement.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream.
President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on November 22, 1963. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, enacted July 2, 1964, was a landmark piece of legislation in the United States that outlawed major forms of discrimination against African Americans and women, including racial segregation. The Watts riots occurred from August 11th to August 15th, 1965, and took place in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. The 5-day riot resulted in 34 deaths, over 1,000 injuries, and $40 million in property damage. Miranda versus Arizona was a landmark 5-4 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. The court held that statements made in response to interrogation by a defendant in police custody will only be admissible at trial if the prosecution can show that the defendant was informed of the right to consult with an attorney before and during questioning, and of the right against self-incrimination prior to questioning by police. and that the defendant not only understood these rights, but voluntarily waived them. Super Bowl I was played on January 15, 1967 in Los Angeles, California. The Green Bay Packers defeated the Kansas City Chiefs by the score of 35-10. At 6:01 p.m., April 4, 1968, a shot rang out at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, killing Martin Luther King Jr. The Stonewall riots were a series of spontaneous, violent demonstrations against a police raid that took place in the early morning hours of June 28, 1969. They are frequently cited as the event that marked the start of the gay rights movement in the U.S. and around the world. On July 21, 1969, at 10:56 p.m. Eastern Time, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon. Buzz Aldrin followed shortly after. The Kent State shootings occurred at Kent State University in Ohio on May 4, 1970, shortly after noon. Members of the Ohio National Guard opened fire on unarmed college students, killing 4 and wounding 9. The 8 guardsmen who were indicted had all charges against them dropped. The 26th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution reduced the minimum voting age to 18. It was adopted on July 1, 1971. The Watergate scandal began on June 17, 1972, with the arrest of 5 men for breaking and entering into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex. The scandal eventually led to the resignation of President Richard Nixon. Roe v. Wade, decided by the U.S. Supreme Court on January 22, 1973, overturned state laws against abortion. On April 3rd and 4th, a series of tornadoes were reported in 13 U.S. states and the Canadian province of Ontario. Called the Super Outbreak, there were 319 fatalities. Bill Gates and Paul Allen found Microsoft on April 4, 1975. The Atari 2600, a video game console, was released in October 1977. The 3 Mile Island accident was a nuclear meltdown which occurred at the power plant in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania on March 28, 1979. It was the worst accident in U.S. commercial nuclear power plant history. From November 4, 1979 to January 20, 1981, 52 Americans were held hostage in Tehran, Iran. After 444 days in captivity, the hostages were all released just minutes after Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. On Sunday, May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington state. The eruption deposited ash in 11 states and killed 57 people. On October 23, 1983, 241 Marines were killed by a suicide bomb in Lebanon. The United States military invaded Grenada from October 25th through December 15th, 1983. The city of Los Angeles, California, hosted the 1984 Summer Olympics from July 28th through August 12th. Through the Olympic Games, Mary Lou Retton, gymnast and Olympic gold medalist, became a household name. The Iran-Contra Affair was a political scandal in the United States that came to light in November of 1986. Government officials secretly facilitated the sales of arms to Iran despite an existing embargo, and then spent some of the money raised to fund the Nicaraguan Contras. On January 28, 1986, at 11:38 Eastern Time, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds after liftoff, killing all 7 crew members, including schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe. The Exxon Valdez oil spill occurred in Prince William Sound, Alaska on March 24, 1989. Hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil were released, making it one of the most devastating human-caused environmental disasters in history. A major earthquake struck San Francisco, California on October 17, 1989, at 5:04 p.m. local time. The quake lasted for about 10 seconds and measured 6.9 on the Richter scale. The Hubble Space Telescope was launched and placed into low Earth orbit on April 24, 1990. The Persian Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, was a war fought between a coalition of forces, mostly American, and Iraq. The war took place from August 2, 1990 through February 28, 1991. The Cold War between the Soviet Union and the USA came to an end in 1991 when the USSR was declared officially dissolved on December 25th. The Cold War ran for about 45 years.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Rioting in Los Angeles, California was sparked on April 29, 1992, after a jury acquitted 3 white and 1 Hispanic police officers accused in the videotaped brutal beating of black motorist Rodney King. In all, 53 people died during the riots, with thousands more injured. The Waco siege began on February 28, 1993, and ended violently 50 days later on April 19th. The belligerents involved were the Branch Davidians on one side, and the U.S. agencies of ATF, FBI, the Texas National Guard, and Texas Rangers on the other. The U.S. agencies set the buildings ablaze, killing all within, including 2 pregnant women and over 20 children. On the east coast of North America, between March 12th and 13th, 1993, a large cyclonic storm occurred. It was unique for its intensity, massive size, and wide-reaching effect. 310 people were killed in Canada, the U.S., and Cuba. Don't ask, don't tell was the official U.S. policy on homosexuals serving in the military from December 1993 through September 2011. The North American Free Trade Agreement, also called NAFTA, is an agreement signed by the governments of Canada, Mexico, and the United States, creating a trilateral trade bloc in North America. It came into effect on January 1, 1994. The Northridge earthquake struck on January 17, 1994 at 4:31 a.m. Pacific Time in the greater Los Angeles area. The earthquake was a magnitude 6.7 on the Richter scale and could be felt as far away as Las Vegas, Nevada. On April 19, 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing took place. Shortly after 9 o'clock a.m. Central Time, the bomb detonated, killing 168, including 19 children. Timothy McVeigh, the architect of the attack, was executed on June 11, 2001. After a lengthy and internationally publicized criminal trial, which took place between January and October of 1995, O.J. Simpson was acquitted of the murder of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman. The 1998 United States Embassy bombings were a series of attacks that occurred on August 7, 1998, in which hundreds of people were killed. The truck bombs were detonated simultaneously in front of the U.S. embassies located in the capitals of Tanzania and Kenya. The attacks were linked to local members of an extremist Muslim group. Matthew Wayne Shepard, a student at the University of Wyoming, was tortured and left for dead near Laramie, Wyoming. The attacks took place on the night of October 6, 1998, and he died 6 days later. The brutality of the crime raised public awareness of hate crimes, and on October 22, 2009, the U.S. Congress passed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. On April 20, 1999, between 11:19 a.m. and 12:08 p.m. Mountain Time, students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold conducted the Columbine High School massacre, which took the lives of 12 students, one teacher, and the killers who committed suicide. 21 others were injured. The massacre provoked debate regarding gun use, gun availability, and gun violence among youth. On June 12, 1999, the NATO-led peacekeeping Kosovo force entered Kosovo, then a province of Yugoslavia, with U.S. forces securing the southeastern sector. The September 11 attacks, commonly referred to as 9/11, were a series of 4 coordinated suicide attacks upon the United States in New York City and Washington, D.C., between 8:46 and 10:28 a.m. Eastern Time. 19 members of Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden, hijacked 4 passenger jets, intentionally flying 2 of them into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, and the 4th crashed into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after passengers attempted to take control. Nearly 3,000 died in the attacks. This event would trigger the War on Terrorism, ongoing to date. The war in Afghanistan began on October 7, 2001. The primary cause of the invasion was the September 11 attacks, with the intent of dismantling the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization and ending its use of Afghanistan as a base. The war is ongoing to date. The USA Patriot Act was signed into law by President George W. Bush on October 26, 2001. The act, in response to the 9/11 attacks, dramatically reduced many freedoms of the American public, but strengthened law enforcement agencies' gathering of information within the United States. The United States Department of Homeland Security is a cabinet department of the U.S. federal government created on November 25, 2002. Operation Iraqi Freedom, also called the Iraq War, was a conflict in Iraq from March 20, 2003 through December 18, 2011. The video sharing website YouTube was launched on February 14, 2005. Hurricane Katrina struck the south and northern Gulf of Mexico between August 23rd and 30th, 2005. The largest number of deaths among the 1,833 confirmed dead occurred in New Orleans, Louisiana, when the levee system catastrophically failed. The government at all levels were painfully slow to respond. On April 16, 2007, the Virginia Tech massacre took place. Sung Hui Cho killed 32 people and wounded 25 others before committing suicide. The massacre is the deadliest shooting incident by a single gunman in U.S. history. One of the highlights of the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing was Michael Phelps, who broke 2 Olympic records for most gold medals in one Olympics and for most career gold medals of an Olympian.